Today we're continuing on talking about writing television news. And so last class you got the particulars on the assignment for the story type, which is a Vo Sot. Who could describe to me the basic structure of a Vo Sot type story? How does it start? JP?
A lead, the anchor's lead.
Okay.
On camera. Of course.
Anchor lead.
And then voiceover, the anchor speaks over footage.
Voiceover. Yep.
And then SOT, sound on tape.
Which stands for what?
Soundbite.
A soundbite. That's right. Okay. So this is the structure of Vo Sot. That's quite right.
And then another VO.
Sorry? And another VO on the way out. Not obligatory, but often the case, definitely. So the anchor begins, let's say, on cam. Let's write it this way. First off, we see the anchor on camera. Then we have a voiceover, which means we hear the anchor talking on top of B-roll, of pictures of whatever's going on. And then we have the sound on tape, the actuality or the sound bite in television. And then JP's quite right. Very often you'll go back to video in order to get out of the story. And that way, when we cut again to the anchor with a new story, we're cutting to something brand new. That's the point of putting some B-roll there at the end. Then when we cut back to the anchor, he's onto or she's onto another story. That's basically the way it goes. So digging around the KTVU website to see what's current, I found a couple of things before we which ones were good? The Las Vegas survivor, not having a baby, reunited with her mom. So this is a variation on the Vo Sot type of story. As I said, these are kind of the simplest schematic examples, but when you actually do news, you can mix it up a little bit. So let's look at this example. Turn it up and hope it streams. Even goes full screen while it's doing it. It's all frozen.
Central Florida native back home with friends and family after running for her life to survive that massacre. News station's Matt Trezza with the emotional reunion at Orlando International.
Nicole Crane walking into the terminal, making a beeline for her mom. Hugging her close, the Las Vegas shooting survivor says she didn't think she'd ever see her again.
The feeling to not think that you would ever hold these important people in your life again is just, it's mind-boggling.
Crane says she was having the time of her life with her boyfriend at the country music concert when the shots rang out.
For me, it was tunnel vision. Just get to safety. What's going on? What's happening? Just mass confusion, mass pandemonium.
She says she and her boyfriend ran 1.5 miles to safety in a stranger's hotel room, where she called her mom to say she was okay. Her mother, Monica, says she's just happy she's home.
Blessed, speechless, happy that she's safe.
But Nicole says the memories haunt her.
It took away a part of you that you feel like you're never going to get back. A truck backfiring just makes you crouch to the ground. And
now safe in Central Florida, Nicole says she just wants to take it easy and attend her 10-year high school reunion. She says she knows she's one of the lucky ones. At Orlando International Airport, Matt Trezza, Fox 35 News.
Okay, so that's a little bit different than the ideal type that we presented to you, but it's also similar. So what did you see? What similarities did you see there? In terms of the structure, did we have any voiceover?
Yes.
Yep. Yes, we did. We had plenty of pictures. For instance, this would be what we call B-roll, and we had somebody talking over it.
But no on-camera anchors.
Right. When the show begins, that's what's a little bit different. Do we have SOT? Do we have sound on tape?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So when she talks and we see the little sound bites there, so those are your SOTs. And we did come back at the end to VO. But what was different about this, Mike is pointing it out, is we had a reporter getting mixed up in this. So it's not your classic Vo Sot, which is done by the anchor at the anchor's desk. And I think the reason for that is that while this was shown last night, I guess, on KTVU, the local Fox affiliate over in Oakland, covering the whole Bay Area, it originates from a station in Florida. This is, this is shared property over the Fox network. They've picked it up and they've broadcast it and are showing it to us. So that, I think, is why we've got a reporter mixed up in it. So again, to look at this, we're going to have, if it streams again, we're hoping. So we'll start with the anchor here in the Bay Area, hi, and then we'll move to the reporter who starts off.
Central Florida native back home with friends and family after running for her life to survive that massacre. News station's Matt Trezza with the emotional reunion at Orlando International.
Nicole Crane walking into the terminal, making a beeline for her mom.
So there we are. There's the VOs, and then we'll have the SOTs there at the same time, interspersed, basically cut in with the rest of it. So that's a variant on the Vo Sot. I mean, the thing that what is different from what we'll discuss in just a second, which is the full kind of package, is we don't have that reporter on camera. It's pretty simple. They sent a person out to the airport. No reporter on site, and just shot the reunion and we had her talking a little bit, and then they took it back to the station and worked it into a Vo Sot. So remember, for your information, the textbook is not very detailed on all of this, although it's not bad. It does contain several examples of Vo Sots. But we're using the PDF that I've prepared for you, which has recently been fixed by me, because yesterday, or last class, it wasn't looking that good. So remember, this is how it would look on paper. The Vo Sot, you have your slug, you have a video column and an audio column, which basically contains what people are saying over here and what we're seeing on this side. And then as you go down, some simple indications as to, first we'll hear the anchor start the story, then it'll continue into voiceover as we talk over different video, and at some point we'll get to the SOT, identified as SOT here, and we know that person is on camera, and it can end up on a VO, on a voiceover, just like JP was saying. So that's how it looks on paper. Right. Was everyone here last class, or is some of this new? So let me just remind you then that here's the assignment that's due on Tuesday, to write your own version of this. So first of all, the formatting document I just showed you is linked here, so you can see the example again and follow the example. Learn the vocabulary that's in there as well, as to what's an SOT, what's VO mean, what does B-roll mean, and the different types of stories. And then here's the assignment itself. So you have a reel of footage that I've put up on YouTube for you of a police training activity, and your job is to take whatever visual cues you want, whatever shots you want to use from those 2-3 minutes of video, those you will put into the video side of your script, and on the audio side you will write a 45-second VO SOT, so you know that you are going to write for the anchor who presents the story, and then you're going to write to tape as you cut to B-roll of the exercise of people shooting paint bullets and such. You're going to write that yourselves. And then when you get to the SOT, the sound on tape, I've transcribed the interview from Captain Azuelo, it's in that tape as well. So you pick the sound bite that you want to use out of there. Okay, Jenny?
And the B-roll is synonymous with the voiceover, right?
Is not exactly synonymous. What B-roll is the industry term for video which you don't hear with the sound completely up. So I've always wondered, like, if that's B-roll, what the heck is A-roll? And what is A-roll? No one talks about A-roll, but what A-roll is a full screen interview. For instance, when Captain Azuelo talks, we see that in full screen, right? But we just say at that point SOT, so no one would use that. But we use B-roll to describe all of those pictures that run while the anchor is telling the story in voiceover. So they could be any number of pictures. In the case of the example we just saw, this is all B-roll, right? Because we don't have the sound full up on this. Maybe we hear in the background, "Oh, I'm so glad you're alive," or something. But what we get is really the anchor voicing over, saying, they've been dying to see each other for the last few days. Finally, mother and daughter are reunited after the traumatic events in Las Vegas. So that's the voiceover while you see these pictures. And whether we're seeing them hugging or anything else, it's all B-roll. And then when she actually goes full frame and we hear her speak, sound up full, then it's SOT. Yeah. So B-roll is shorthand for pictures, and in this case, some of the other B-roll was the cell phone footage from the actual attack and everything that's also in there. Give them their chance. Okay, so just looking back at the assignment again. So advice, what to watch out for. Remember, you should have a slug. So at the top, story title, reporter's name, and the total runtime. In the anchor, so the anchor gives the lead. So you want to pay attention to grabbing the audience and giving them some basic information. And in this case, be careful, because this is, although it's a drill, there are people shooting guns in an elementary school. So you want your audience to understand that, and otherwise you run the risk of getting a lot of shocked people phoning the station, right? And then things to think about in the VO section. Well, this is your chance to write in concert with pictures, all right? So as I said, it really seems kind of odd and funny if you're sitting there describing everything everybody sees, The emotional reunion happened in the hallway of the airport, and she was wearing black, and she gave her mother a long hug. And no, you don't need to do that, right? We'll see that. So the visual is one track, if you want, creating meaning, and the audio is another track, and they can work together. Sometimes you want to punctuate, you want the audio to say exactly what's in the video, but more often than not, they're running side by side, creating two levels of meaning. And we can process that. So this is your chance to think, okay, what picture would go well with what I want to say here? And even, as a reporter or an editor putting these things together, you'll think more and more about how can I create a sequence that runs visually to tell a story, and what should I say at the same time to, that should be told through speech in text, So that's your chance here. It's only 45 seconds, but give it some thought. And then the SOT, you're picking the best possible SOT. And the textbook is, advising you to pay special attention as to how you lead into a soundbite and how you get out of it. Okay, so again, some of the easiest ways or the laziest ways, let's say, would be, Captain Azuelo told us this, and then you play the sound, and that's kind of boring. But if you can lead in more with, Captain Azuelo says that this is a challenge that recruits face every winter, or something like that, and then so you're adding more information as you lead into the sound bites. And yet still identifying who's talking and stuff. Remember, you can use super as well, so that you identify it as super. Kyle?
Do you need both? Isn't that redundant? Isn't that the point of the super? Is to kind of...
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
there's no need to put it in. Give the viewers a secret to say. It must be identified as super in the video column of the script. Yeah, so you have to, but it could be redundant. Yeah, redundant. So consider it optional.
Okay.
Yeah. The start and the end of the SOC should be identified in the video and audio column. Yeah. So look at the example to see how that goes. And then finally, you go back to the VO at the very end where the anchor, the way stories usually end is either they sum up what's being said, or if it's a type of story where you can look ahead to something else, they'll often cue you as to, what are the next steps in this story? What are you going to hear next? So that would be that. All right, we'll see you. Okay. Let's leave the student view for a sec. So any questions about that? No? Okay, I hope you enjoy writing that one.
We can pick up any 45 seconds from the video, the footage.
Well,
like the footage
no, the
is like
whole thing's supposed to be 45.
Oh, okay.
So the SOT comes in around 15 or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah. So you don't want to take a full 45 seconds of what the guy is saying, because you want, let's say, 15 seconds on camera, 15 seconds of VO, 15 seconds of SOT. I already gave it too much. Let's say 10 of VO and something like that to get you to 45. 45 might be a little short, but try for that. Cool. Okay. Questions? You're good for Tuesday. All right, so looking ahead to next steps, October 31st is when your package script is. So this is a different type of television story, a television news story, although it builds on the Vo Sot. Think of a package as you're going to see the reporter on camera introducing the story, and then you go to a pre-recorded package, which is a Vo Sot, basically, and then at the end of it, you come back to the reporter, who's usually live, and it's the reporter does the lockout. So you could think, and I think Kyle, you said this last time, right? Like a package is kind of like a sandwich with a Vo Sot sandwich between two reporters' comments or something. Or you were saying it was like a wrap, which is true. It is. You're wrapping a pre-recorded package up.
I think that was actually JP.
Was it JP? All right, credit where credit's due.
I'll take the credit.
No, we'll give it to JP as well.
Oh, rap.
All right. Well, here we have.
For
What's that? No.
package. I thought we said the voice Vo Sot was like a rap.
Oh, okay.
And the feature was like a package.
Well, the feature is, yeah, I guess could be. Let's just look at what a package actually is. No. So what
Just
do we?
saw one.
Not really. It was more like a Vo Sot, because at a package you really want to see your reporter actually appear there. So let's see. One, two, three. I found a couple here. Local news. Coping with the emotional aftermath. This one's pretty much like a classic package.
So then the package would be something like.
Just Deborah Villalone joins us live from the Sonoma County Fairgrounds.
Sorry, say that again?
The package would end on like the reporter going, I'm
Yes.
Chow reporting.
Right, because there's a lockout.
In Santa Rosa, and what's
Okay, well, let's back up here. Because on the website they cut off the anchor's intro, but we still hear a little bit of the anchor.
Villalone joins us live from the Sonoma County Fairgrounds in Santa Rosa, and what's being done to help? Deb.
Ken, we're outside one of the larger evacuation centers where, in addition to care and a cot, people are offered counseling. Survivors have moved from the initial shock to a range of emotions, and experts say it can be overwhelming. Lucy Flores leaves an Allstate tent with a check and a smile after a hard 10 days. Her worst moment since the fire was seeing her house in Coffey Park leveled, but each day since has been better.
I'm busy. I keep myself busy, and there's things I need to do that have to be done. And so I move forward every day that I get to wake up and do it.
I have trouble sleeping. People are anxious. I know I've been kind of figuring out what day is it.
The head of Sonoma County Behavioral Health had 120 clinicians spread across 34 shelters at the peak of the crisis. People had stories to tell, and telling them was therapeutic. It still is.
I was at Pete's yesterday morning and was talking to a guy, and I said, "How you doing?" And he just broke down. And then after he was finished, he said, "I don't know what happened, but I do feel a little better."
We don't want to call it a mental illness. It is a process of losing things.
Board of Supervisors Chair Shirley Zane, during official updates on fire size and missing persons, pushes the importance of mental health. As a former family therapist, she says survivors are experiencing more than grief, and if they're dwelling on their near death, having nightmares and physical symptoms, those may be signs of post-traumatic stress disorder.
You also have tremendous headaches. You may not want to eat. You have stomach aches. All of those symptoms that happen when you've experienced trauma, and then also the huge loss.
Sadness, anxiety, even guilt, all emotions to be expected, and most people will move through them. But if not, counseling can help. Children take their cues from parents, and they should share their feelings too.
And kids experience grief very differently than adults do. So really watch the behavior of your children. Spend a lot of time with them. Really devote yourself to them.
That's why it's important for parents, if they're feeling, to get some, talk to somebody if they're really feeling anxious, because then that impacts their kids too.
For many victims, family is keeping them going.
My kids, my husband, just keeping myself busy, and I can't just sit around and cry and do nothing. There's stuff that has to be done, and I'm doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. And as we all know, hugs are good medicine too. Community meetings over the next 2 nights in the North Bay are focused on debris removal, but clinicians will be on hand to talk to people as well. And there will be counseling for kids in the fire zones when they go back to school, because Ken and Julie, for some of them, they'll be in a different school because theirs was damaged or destroyed.
And Deborah, how busy is that shelter behind you 10 days after the fire started?
We did peek our heads in, and it is pretty quiet in there, but that's a reflection of the fact that the evacuations have been lifted in all of the unburned areas. At the peak of this, there were 5,000 people spread across 34 shelters, and I'm told now there's 500 people in 7 shelters. So it has definitely eased.
Yeah, good sign to see those numbers dwindling so much. Deborah Villone in Santa Rosa tonight. Deb, thank you.
Okay, so that one was pretty much a classic package. Jenny?
So number 1, I gather this was a much bigger package because it kept on going back
longer.
to VOSO.
Yeah.
And then number 2, outside of I would gather the part where the anchors are doing the back and forth with the field reporter, that's outside the package, right?
Yeah.
So, after having finished it and then they're live talking with each other, that's completely...
That's not something that you would have to write. Yeah, exactly. Like in the script, eventually there would be questions for them to bounce back and forth. But that's, and that, the fact that they would follow up with a question, the reporter would be alerted to that. So they'd know that it's, okay, I didn't just finish my thing and now I'm gone. It's like she knows she has to wait, because they're going to come back at her with something else. But you wouldn't script that, yeah. So exactly right, yeah. You start out. Let's just see in terms of length of time. I'm not going to play it completely again. It was kind of a dull one. But this happens always, with a disaster. It becomes the center of the news.
Deborah Villone joins us live from the Sonoma County Fairgrounds.
3:45 there. It's 3:45, right? Yeah, and we're really right in at the beginning, so it's probably 3 minutes, which is very long for a package. It's usually about 2.5 minutes. But when you're sending everybody all up to North Bay, and that's basically all the news you can cover, because everybody's up there, so you got to spin it out like that. So unfortunately, disaster coverage is not the most interesting, but it was a classic. So there she is. She's doing what's called the stand-up, when you stand in front of the camera with your microphone. And notice it's the middle of the night. So the reason why all this happens, this is sort of for your information, because you don't need to write, exterior, nighttime, etc. But a local TV station will have a limited number of microwave transmitting trucks, like maybe 2 or 3, that they can send out with a videographer and a reporter like this. So for the 10 o'clock news, you always see it. The major stories will have somebody standing around in the dark doing a live shot, this, from in front of something, City Hall or whatever. And usually they're talking about something that happened hours earlier. But the idea is that the show gives itself a sense of immediacy and presence in the community by actually being out there and reporting from the site. So that's why she's out there in the middle of the night. And so the package, this part of the package is live.
Yeah.
Talk, and there's always a little delay.
And experts say it can be overwhelming. Lucy.
So there, that little cut right there was, so we start on a shot on her, we pan over to the entry of the shelter or whatever, and then there's a cut, and this part is pre-recorded and pre-edited and has been beamed back to the station, and it is cut into the flow of things after that live shot. So that's why it's called a package, because this part is pre-packaged. You have the reporter doing a stand-up, eventually you cut to the package, whatever it is that they've cut together, which is usually a lot of VO and SOT. Sometimes you'll see the reporter in the midst of the pre-recorded package earlier in the day. They'll do a stand-up in the midst of it, especially if they have to change locations or alert the audience, hey, something else different is happening now. In a story like this, which is just basically endless VO, SOT, and they're always on the same topic, you don't really need to do that. But let's say it was an investigative piece where we had to go to a different location, mayor's office or something, you'll often see a reporter come back and do a second stand-up within the package in order to shift things over there. And then at the end of it, you'll get the reporter comes back and does their sign off, their lockout. Nika?
Are there any express differences between a VO SOT and the package?
Well, only if the reporter winds up in the midst of all of it. So that would be one. If there is like an additional stand-up in the middle of it, you would never see that in a VO SOT. And I guess the other thing is, in the classic Vo Sot, it's the anchor who's actually doing the voiceover and that type of thing. The variant that we showed at the start of class today had a reporter who never did an on-camera stand-up, but it was the reporter basically leading us through the VO and stuff. But your classic VO SOT is done by the anchor. So the anchor starts talking, then you get voiceover B-roll, and then you get an SOT, and then you're back to the anchor doing another story.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought the reporter was the one doing the voiceover with the classic one.
The Vo Sot, yeah, let's see.
I thought the anchor was just to go ahead and introduce it to lead in and whoever the field.
Yeah, no, and because these types of stories are done basically so that the anchor can do them all, because you don't have reporters to do every story.
Welcome back. Well, coming off of a bye week, the Jacks of SDSU got back to business Saturday, topping Western Illinois 31-10. Sitting atop the Missouri Valley Conference at 5-1 overall and 3-0 in the conference, Coach says the Jacks played a complete game, which is exactly what they were looking for.
Zenner came through. We did make some plays throwing the ball, but that's exciting. It's exciting that we can return the opening kickoff and return an interception early in the third period. So that's a complete game, complete effort. We just need to clean up some things, and we will.
The Jacks are in Cedar Falls, Iowa next Saturday to take on Northern Iowa.
That's it. So that's your classic. As you notice, a reporter wasn't involved in that, and 9 times out of 10, your Vo Sot will not have a reporter. Again, because the packages cost a lot of money, you have to have a reporter working all day, you have to send a truck out to do the stand-up, and you have to have an editor put it together, whereas the Vo Sot is much simpler to produce. You got the anchor, they start reading off the prompter, And in the control room, at a certain point, they trigger a tape of football players running around, and then 15 seconds later, they trigger a second tape which has the interview clip on it, and then back out to switch back to the football player tape, and then you're onto the anchor again. So it takes no pre-packaging. It can all be done during the context of the news broadcast. So that's why the Vo Sot it brings visuals, it brings sound bites, but it doesn't require all of the pre-production editing and everything else that the package does. So your classic Vo Sot will not have a reporter because they're out doing different things.
So 90% of the time it is the anchor. But
it's the anchor,
the variations of that
That's
Vo
right.
Sot can include
And so in your assignment for the police training, it doesn't say, write the anchor's lead in and then have a reporter take it. It doesn't do that. It just says you got 45 seconds, start off on camera with the anchor, write the VO, and then choose your SOT and then go back out. You can go straight out from an SOT or you can go back to VO. So that assignment doesn't say write an anchor's lead in. Yeah. Now your package, it does. So package is different. And of course, I'm going to get everyone confused by talking about two things before the next one is due. But the reason I really want to do this is because the package assignment is building on your radio feature script, right? So the package assignment is due. So this is the VO SOT. It's due next class, next Tuesday. It's a short little thing to do. But when we get to the package, you got 2 more weeks from now to do the package. And the package is based on the interview that you did for your radio feature. So, one of the things you could do is start off by just taking, what you did for your radio feature and starting to think, okay, what kind of pictures should I go with this? Bring it into a 2-column format and start off with that and see, how that's working for you. But you also need to add a second source. So let's talk about that and let's just see settings. So this is 2 weeks from now, right? The reason I'm telling it to you now is so you can figure out what is that second source going to be. Is it going to be another person that you have to talk to? Or is it going to be some secondary source like other articles or research that you could do about your issue? That would all depend on what your story is and stuff. So this is supposed to be a package, 2.5 minutes, so it's not as long as the one that we saw. And so in the package, 2 weeks from now, and we'll talk about this next week again. So you'll have a stand-up, you'll have graphics, you'll have a 2-column script and stuff, and just the second source is what I want you to think about now. Is it somebody else who's going to talk on camera, or is it going to be some other information that you can put into the VO sections? It all depends on your story. So this is Michaela Payne. She was a student last year, a year ago already. Okay. So she did a piece about people learning tango here at City College, and it's quite a nice one. So although she points off, she called it a Vo Sot, which is not. It's actually a package. So it starts with the anchor, right? Here in the Bay Area, a community of tango dancers is thriving. And then
wouldn't you say
Michaela Payne takes it over. Well, no one says this is perfect, but it's actually a really good job. Yes.
Wouldn't you say this reporter explains?
Yes, or something like that. You could say our Michaela Payne was there, or whatever you want. Yep. And then you have Nat Sound. You have some classic tango music. And then Michaela begins. A dance party every semester called a milonga is where the City College Tango program's success is most apparent. It feels like a big family party. There's music, decorations, and food. Elders greet each other with a thump on the back and a kiss on the cheek. Experienced dancers are partner up with first-timers. And almost everyone is up on their feet, dancing. And so on. So this is quite a good one. So you can check this out in addition to the others. What was so nice about this one is that the way that she wrote it, you really felt a sense of community, that people were hanging out and having a very good time. And I thought that was very effective, what she did. So that one's up there. Check that out if you want. But otherwise, the assignment itself describes in a fair bit of detail, again, what the structure should be and how to write it out. Okay, so for now, we'll look it over next week, but for now, the idea is just, okay, look at the reporting you did for your radio feature. Consider now you're going to redo it as a television 2.5 minute. What kind of pictures do you need? And you need to add another source. Do you need to talk to another person who's involved? Or do you want to go get more information about this? You have 2 weeks to find that additional information to include. Okay?
So would additional information be, say, like in the profile case, if I were to go to the website and they have a profile on person?
Yeah, there's a number of sort of, not tricks, but sort of standard ways to go about it. But for a profile, for instance, if the person that you were interviewing actually talked about anybody else, or if they have a colleague, or they have another source of information on them, then that's often what you do in a profile. You know, you've noticed if you read any magazine profiles or stuff, is constantly it's friends of so and so talking about your profile person. So, you know, you could look in your case. Did they mention anybody else who could give you a soundbite as to what they're like, or etc.? That's one option. If you can't go there in a profile, did they raise any issue for which you want to bring in more information? Did your journalist win any awards? Were there any, you know, issues that they're well known for tackling, that kind of thing? So that it's not all just constantly the person in your profile talking all the time. It should be, there should be some kind of additional source, something
like
else.
his colleague or something.
If you can get that. It's not obligatory, but that would be typically what people would do for a profile.
What is what?
Typically what you do for a profile when you're profiling someone. But actually we wanted...
What did she just say?
She said it would be a colleague.
Oh, okay.
A colleague, yeah. We wanted to look at your radio feature as well, and also, I mean, in terms of this class, this semester, you know, I'm thinking about the discussions we already had about, you know, the additional sources that you're looking for. Can we take a look at yours? Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look, and we'll think about talking sort of on our way. Okay, people are just saying hi. Wonderful. Where are we here?
For the next Tuesday, because like this footage have 3 minutes, right? So we're gonna take out the only first 45 seconds.
They're not related at all. So the Vo Sot is about the cops who are having a training assignment, right? The package is about whatever you wrote your radio feature on.
Okay, yeah, but like for the next assignment, this is 45 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Which 45 seconds in 3 minutes?
No 3 minutes.
No, he's talking about the 3 minutes of video. It's any 45 seconds you want.
Oh, right.
And it's also not going to be. It's not going to be 45 seconds.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If we're going to look at. Right, so it's 3 minutes, right, Kanata? But what you're going to do is you're going to find a 15 seconds.
In elementary school. So for us, it's very important to prepare the officers both physically and mentally to respond to a situation such as an active shooter.
Boom, that's it. That's your soundbite, okay?
Yeah.
All right, now otherwise, when you're doing VO and you're saying, you know, officers and cadets were training for an active shooter situation, you're now just picking pictures or video from here that are going to play behind your VO. So, right, so this is, you may have 15, 20 seconds of video like this. All right, so you just briefly describe the shot. You know, medium shot, corpse lying on the ground. Close up, paintball bullets. Close up, emergency alarm. You know, etc. Wide shot, people shooting at each other. So That's all. So out of all of these 3 minutes, you pick a 15-second soundbite of him, and maybe 5 or 6 shots. Each one lasts 2-3 seconds. You don't even have to time them out, but just say what's in the shots.
Oh.
Is that clear?
Yeah, like any time.
The ones that fit for you. Yeah, and anytime. What you're basically doing is putting pictures over the voiceover story that you're telling. Okay? So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great. I'm totally glad we cleared that up, because that's important. And then
so with the VO / B-roll and the SOTs, I mean, they would total about 30 seconds.
in the assignment for the Vo Sot assignment is supposed to be 45 seconds
Right,
long.
yeah. Right. So the anchor would be
maybe 10, 15.
15, and then the total inclusion of the VO and the SOT would be another 30.
Yeah. Kind of short, huh? Maybe we should make it 60 seconds. The 45 is your typical.
Why not?
Your typical time length. Yeah. Okay, click here to download 1.33 gigabytes. So somebody sent me a gigantic file. Why on earth would they do that? Cancel that one.
1.3 gigs.
Yeah, sometimes somebody misguidedly shoots a video interview and then submits it instead of an actual script. So if that is something somebody did, you should be aware that you really need to read what the assignment is and get with a project that you're supposed to write scripts, not submit videos. And I hope to see a script coming in here. So let's expand this and into submissions. And there you are after all that, but you guys asked some really good questions. Well, Kyle, would you like to read it?
Sure.
Okay, let me just full screen it because it goes crazy otherwise. Go for it.
As the cost of living in San Francisco continues to climb, so too does the number of people living in vehicles. This trend is evident near the City College of San Francisco's Ocean Avenue campus. During the day, while parking lots and streets are full, this may not be as apparent. Into the late evenings, however, you will see the same few cars, trucks, and vans making their U-turns to avoid the street sweeper. Kyle sat down with one self-declared van dweller to see what life was like inside their mini mobile home. Come on in, it's chilly outside. I can't make the sound, but it's not your typical front door as we entered through the passenger side door. Please take off your shoes, or please take your shoes off before coming back. We like to keep the place clean. It gets dirty quickly if we don't keep up with the basics. It has been 3 years since Shelley and her partner Chris moved into this 70 square foot space together. We decided we want to travel. We saw a BuzzFeed article titled 29 Must-See American Destinations, and we thought, why not? We got a van from Chris's uncle and we started to build. 3 years later, and we found ourselves in San Francisco, a big change from our lives in New York. What is life like? What has life been like inside a space this limited? What would you say are the pros and cons? It isn't easy. While this lifestyle has allowed us to travel frequently and simultaneously eliminate our debts, it isn't always sunshine and rainbows. We don't have at-home access to things like a shower or even a restroom. And don't get me started on the lack of personal space, especially when Chris is at home. And those are only issues inside the van. What about external factors? Have you had any issues with the locals or from authorities? Not really. We try not to stay in one place for too long, especially when near residential areas. As far as law enforcement goes, we have not really had any issues anywhere across the U.S. Do you feel safe out here? We try to avoid back alleys and areas with a high homeless population. We have not had any issues with safety either. Do you see yourself in a traditional house in the future? Yes, one day. That day will come when it's time. For right now, I am just a student of life, and van life has taught me a great many things. The city shows no signs of slowing its growth rate. As the cost of traditional housing rises, our curbs and parking lots may continue to see an increase in mobile homes. From City College, Ocean Avenue, this is Kyle Murphy for non-mainstream news.
All right, good job, man.
I have a question.
One sec, could I make a comment before your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so first comment, just like a basic way of spelling there. So you're writing it T-H-E-R-E, but it would be appropriate sometimes when you're using it as T-H-E-I-R. Okay, so that's one like little
They screw up a
nitty
basic
thing.
there.
Yeah, it's like phonetic. Now the other thing is you never will be including your questions in this type of story. Okay. That type of story actually has a name. It's called a QA. When you hear the reporter actually asking questions, it's a special type of story. But usually in this assignment and this type of story, what you would be doing is, instead of saying, it's just a different way of leading into the soundbite. In this case, you lead in with the question that you asked to get the soundbite. But otherwise, you would say, what has life been like inside a space this limited? What would you say are the pros and cons? Instead, you'd come back and say, Vaishali tells us it's a great way to live, but there are also its downsides. And then in you go. And you're basically, you're cutting out a question and you're just,
rewording it.
Yeah, basically that's it. So you don't hear the questions and answers, the QA stuff.
Okay.
I like the way you came into it, especially early on, because all of these little kind of short actualities are nice. Please take your shoes off. We're getting a feeling that they're inviting us into the story. And I like that. And it's a nice way to make it less formal, I think. So that worked out.
So like the one that's right under where you have highlighted right now is kind of the proper way to move into it?
Absolutely, yeah. So while you're using the actuality to give us a sense of who these people are, how they live, hearing them, your job in your VOs, basically, if we're looking ahead, is to give us facts, is to make assertions. You know what I mean? And so you want to, part of being concise is basically figuring out what those assertions need to be from one actuality or SOT to the next one. You're really just giving us information,
Okay.
So nice job. Other comments about this story and stuff?
You went ahead and addressed my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the way simply of taking your questions and turning them into assertions is part of the trick. Yeah. So now it's great that we have a great example here of where you could go next in taking this into a television format, because now you're thinking you're going to have a camera, and only in your mind's eye, but you've got a camera now, so you can actually bring us into their vehicle, the way where they live, and show us stuff about it. And obviously you can correct this, because in just in a TV package there's no QA either. So again, you'll tweak that for sure. So one of your jobs is going to be, thinking how am I going to see it? But now I also want to come back and talk to you about, so what would you think would be your second source? And how are you thinking about it? And I know we already talked about it and you had some good ideas, so I know that you can,
Yeah, I have a few options, but I still really don't know which way I'm planning to take it. It's just kind of going to be depending on what I get next. I mean,
tell us your options.
One of the easiest ones would probably be her partner, Chris. But then the other couple of things I'm looking at are another van lifer who is a teacher here at school, and then the police officer as well, going more into the other side of it from the outside of the van life, and looking at the legalities of what's going on with the increase in.
Right.
Originally, the idea was to have this be an event piece, but as I wrote it, obviously very clearly you can see that it kind of takes a feature more than a...
Well, now you'll have time. You'll have time in 2.5 minutes to do this. I mean, you'll probably cut out some of the, homey aspect in the beginning to save yourself some space. And you may use a couple less of the actualities because you'll bring in something else. But so you were talking about a CCSF faculty. How do I write that? CCSF faculty as one option for. So we're looking at a second source, right? Right now, Kyle has profiled Vaishali. Chris, I think, would be not as good because Chris and Vaishali are basically in the vehicle, and as you said, getting a sense of the story from the outside, it's a great opportunity in using a second source. So a police officer would be great. You also talked about community, about homeowners around vans. And here, I'm not trying to tie you down to anything you said before, but that was also a very good idea for a second source. Okay, Nika?
A far trickier one.
Yes, well, for sure, yeah. But JP's already, gone full force and they kicked him back, and what the hell can you do? You still got a story out of it. But, so what do you want? Sometimes you won't get it, but if you don't try, you won't get it. Nika?
Would my 2 sources be enough to count as a second source, or are they too similar?
I think in terms of an additional primary source, I think your story, let's back off and let's take, that's a good question for a second, but let's back off and think, okay, picking a second source, what should guide your choice? What should guide your choice is what your audience wants to know, which will be different based on the type of story you're telling. Kyle and Nika are telling very different stories. Remember, Nika's story is about the book fair on behalf of the library. Kyle, we've got van life and stuff. And so they're very different stories. What, as an audience member, would you like to know about people living in their vehicles that Kyle has not yet gotten to?
The legal issues.
The legal issues, yeah. And Kyle mentioned that, for sure. So the legalities of it.
How other residents feel about it.
How other residents feel about it, absolutely. So I think, Kyle, and you were already thinking about this a few weeks ago. You had already kind of thought through in your mind, what would my audience want to know about it? It is a story that's very contemporary because there's a lot of people in San Francisco living in unconventional, habitation, whether it's in tents or a vehicle, if they're lucky enough to have the vehicle. So these are really good ways to go. So, of course you have to think about what could I get, but the thing you should really think about is what does my audience want to know, given that we're fascinated. We all drive by people living on the street and we think, yeah, this is terrible, Ket, but do we get to know why they're there? And do we get to know, people who are there quite voluntarily, who are living as it's a choice, and so that's interesting. But then there's all the things, about how does everyone else get along about it. So I'd say, Kyle, either that or that would be an excellent second source, Here we're talking about actually talking to a person on camera, but the legalities could be done through research in what we'd call a secondary source. So other articles written about it, or, basically I think that'd be a way to go, is just search in the Chronicle or whatever. And if you need help, the reference librarians could probably, help you dig up stuff that would be a little bit further than the Chronicle, but that would be a great start. So you got a choice. You need a second source, but it could be a real person or it could be something written up, and so that's really useful. And it's really cool to hear people say, oh yeah, I'd like to know about that. So Nika, I'm wondering, what would your audience want to know more about the book fair?
I don't know. I did interview I did ask single questions to a couple of the guests there, or customers, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
Yeah, in some ways, those are more sort of, because they're so close to what the public who would visit the event would be, they're weaker as sources, because the public probably wants to know something that they couldn't know just on their own by going there or whatever. So a secondary source might be, more about either more of a context, like why does the library need this? What does this contribute to the library? What have they been able to do with the funds that are, and hopefully you can find something specific there rather than just, yeah, it helps us pay for all this stuff. But if they actually target it towards, particular things.
I found their budget report. Can I use that?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So that'd be, kind of a secondary source, and it would be, an actual document, I don't know how much it tells you. So that's the thing. It's like kind of, okay, I've got this paper. Does it tell me something useful?
Well, it's the first part of it's actually a proposal, so it tells you what they want to do with their money.
Ah, that is good. That is good. Yeah. So you could bring that in for sure. And again, it is really, you're just trying to put yourself in the position of your audience. What do they want to know? Especially, okay, I've told them this much. Now what do they want to know? You know, it's like.
For the second one, I definitely want to try to frame it as a horrible thing. So.
Okay. The second one. How do you mean the second one? The book fair?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to like show it like it's something terrible going on?
In a negative light, yeah.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see. You know, again, although we can do this to entertain ourselves, the idea is to inform your audience. So.
Well, I just noticed something like a couple of weeks ago. Carmen mentioned that one of the librarians actually told me something false, but it's more of a gimmick thing. I'll probably just stick with what I had.
See what you can do. Yeah. You know, in all this news reporting, you're kind of taking a back seat towards just presenting the information to the audience, you know. And
have them form their own opinions?
Quote unquote, although we're all aware that depending on what you show them and how you show it to them, you can manipulate them into having particular opinions, I guess. But usually when someone wants to make a big editorial statement, it's not going to be subtle. And then it becomes like, well, that's not really news, you know. Right now we're covering news, but you know, we could easily later on you could come back to the whole thing if you want. In a different vein. In a different vein. Yeah. So Kyle, when you rewrite this, it's probably some of these will go because you'll want to make space for, you know, some of it. And then and I guess
I have more from her too to like be able to potentially
you may
take it in a slightly different.
Exactly. Yeah. So go back to the interview that you did already and see if there's other material that you didn't necessarily use the first time, but would be appropriate for this extended story you want to tell. So it's a how could I say, you know, in journalism, when you cover a story that's at all controversial, the idea is that you're there also to give voice to other opinions about it. And so Kyle's story brings up the idea that, hey, it's pretty cool for Vishali and Chris, they're living this way, but it's also controversial perhaps for people in the surrounding community. It's a problem as well. And your job as, you know, a broadcaster is to tell the story of a lot of people, not just one set of people. So if there's a controversy at all in what you're working on, do your best to represent an additional point of view. So that's why another good argument for not going necessarily and interviewing somebody else living the van life or interviewing another patron at the book fair. You know, maybe Nika, you want to go talk to someone in a secondhand bookstore. I say, you know, we should be getting this stuff, not the library. The library's got tons of money and we're struggling here. I don't know. So that would be actually actively pursuing other points of view on the issue in your community. Jenny?
On the note of controversy, I am thinking back to my piece, and I'm thinking it is very controversial. Like if I were to request a tag along, I mean, I may not even get it at all, but say he was he was capturing those people that were behaving badly.
Yeah.
And certainly they would be angry. I mean, you've seen the segments yourself. They are very, very...
Right.
I don't know if I really want to go ahead and...
Well, if you could ever try and follow up and hear someone who'd be in one of the targets?
Because they're mad.
Yeah.
They're mad. I don't know what...
I don't know if you could get it, but that would be the same sort of, you know, conflict attracts readers. We said that in week 1. And so wherever there's something controversial, you know, looking at the conflict if possible, if you can bring it in.
Or if I can, would say interviewing a local police officer. Would that be a good idea?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, your story's about a broadcaster who goes around looking at people, you know, doing bad things and criticizing them. So I'm not sure if a cop is relevant there or not, you know. Depends. I can see you're thinking about it, so that's good. Just, you know, with some thinking about what your story is actually saying, then you can maybe think through and okay, who's my second source? But just to say that conflict is always of interest to audiences, and also, you know, just ethically, if you see yourself as not there to just have a good time or tell a joke, but you're there in order to inform the whole community about what's going on in the community. If you're only talking about one side of what's happening in a community, then you're not really doing the best job that you could. Not every issue breaks down to, you know, one thing or another, left or right, conservative or liberal. It could be even more complex. So I don't mean just to say that always just go looking for the other point of view, but there really often is another point of view, and if you can see it, try to get it, you know. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we got plenty of time to talk more about this next week, so that'll be good. But just think now, spend the, you know, do your Vo Sot, and keep in the back of your mind, okay, what else can I do with that story, the radio feature, that'll bring in another voice or another opinion or another angle, or more information that my audience wants to know, you know. And so we'll talk more next week about it. Okay. Good. Have a good weekend.